Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest instalment of the IWFM webinar series. And as you can see on your screens today, and hopefully you've joined the right webinar, we hope, but you should have done, is Hygiene and Sustainability in the Workplace Washrooms with our partner Dyson. So we have a very intriguing episode today. You can see a couple of the panelists that's joined us from Dyson today. So just want to remind the audience this webinar is being recorded and we do have a Q&A session in today's webinar, so please send through your questions. So if we just move along, and you can see our panel on the screens as I've just mentioned. Yeah, firstly, host today, many of you would have seen us on the previous 67 episodes of our NTT series. I'm Peter Brogan, Head of Research and Insight at the IWFM, and I will be hosting today's episode as well as taking you through the Q&A session on today's episode. So I do need your questions in, guys. And a bit of a spoiler alert, there are some videos and some polls for you to interact with today. So we're trying to make it as an interactive session for you, and that can only be as good as the questions that come in as well. So as promised and mentioned numerous times, we have a couple of colleagues there from Dyson that are joining us today, and I'm going to go across as we see it. So we've got Holly Dwyer, Sales Manager for Workspace, GB and Ireland for Dyson Professional. So good morning, afternoon, Holly. It'd just be good, just a quick introduction for yourself for the audience and who we'll be hearing from today.
Absolutely, thanks, Peter. So as Peter said, I am one of the sales managers for GB&I within Dyson Professional, so the commercial side of the business. I work within what we call the workspace vertical, so that's anything from your traditional office through to manufacturing, logistics, distribution centres, all of those. And I work with our customers and clients more along a kind of like consultative approach to sort of reduce their sustainability or improve their sustainability to reduce sort of like their carbon footprints across their business.
No, thank you, Holly. And you'll be hearing a lot more from Holly on today's episode. And as you can see, last but not least on the screen there, as I've gone order, is Neil Solanke, Specification of Sales Manager, GP in Ireland for Dyson Professional. So again, afternoon, Neil. And yeah, if you could do the same as Holly just did a stellar example there, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Peter. I appreciate that. So yeah, my name's Neil. I head up specification and sales for Dyson Professional, and we'll touch on that in the course of the presentation as well. I've been at Dyson for about 5 years now, coming up to 5 years. So it's gone pretty fast and lots has happened, which is always good. My core focus and responsibility is very much focused genuinely on delivering innovative, sustainable, and future-proof solutions to a variety of different people, particularly focusing my attention and my expertise on architectural design and facility management community. So that's kind of very much a bit of a snapshot view on my role within Dyson Professional.
No, that's great. And it's always important for our listeners, viewers to know our presenters and our panel today. So hopefully from that, you understand we've got a great lineup from Dyson that's going to take you through a very informative presentation today about the work they do around washrooms. And talking about information, if we move on to the next slide, I mentioned about our partnership with Dyson, and as of today, folks, we've launched a Hygiene in the Workplace guidance, which is our new guidance note, as mentioned there, and you can see on your screens, with Dyson, that will actually give you some guidance around the topic, and it's something that I'm really pleased to bring to the Institute, and obviously partnered with Dyson today. So as you can see, that's available there, but that will be referred to throughout today's webinar and as a gentle reminder later on in the presentation. So talking about information, I've already mentioned, love to have your questions in. I'm keen straight to get into the content today. So at this point, I will be back later for the Q&A, but I will now pass over to Neil, who's opening up proceedings to take you through today's presentation. So thank you, and see you all later. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter. I appreciate that. So a warm welcome to everyone who has attended this afternoon. Thank you for sparing your time to listen to us today. For those that are not familiar with Dyson, hopefully you all are, but if you're not, I wanted to give you a bit of a brief introduction. So Dyson is a global technology company. We have engineering, research, development, and manufacturing and testing operations all across the globe. Having started out in a coach house in the UK, Dyson has consistently grown since it was established in 1993. We are still a family-owned business, employing over 13,000 people across the globe. And our core focus really is on delivering those innovative solutions and technology to the built environment, but also, as most of you may know us, in your home as well. So the format for today will be a short presentation from Holly and I, and we're hoping to cover the following areas and topics. So we'll look at a snapshot of our recent washroom attitudes survey. We'll talk about the importance of hand hygiene, the impact of having a sustainable washroom, and we know how important that is today. And also, what does sustainability mean at Dyson? And then we'll finish with some key takeaways for you, and finally, some question and answers as well. So hopefully that sounds okay and good to everyone. We'll also, as Peter mentioned, have a few polls to keep things interactive, and please do utilize the comment box as well. Before we dig into the detail, I wanted to kind of set the scene a little bit. It's clear that there are some questions that we need to ask ourselves and think about. We know that our attitudes are changing, especially in more recent times, and particularly when it comes to our expectations towards hygiene. With one of the core facilities in the workplace being the washroom, some of the questions that we need to think about are, how have our past experiences changed our perception of washroom facilities? And as we move further into 2022 and beyond, how will these continue to evolve? And what immediate improvements can we make? And lastly, how can we learn from the past and future-proof our estates, keeping both hygiene and sustainability at the fore? Ooh, I've skipped a slide. That's the first technical difficulty. Hopefully we'll manage that without any more. So as Peter mentioned, we have actually created a joint guidance with the IWFM called Hygiene in the Workplace. But we've also carried out a number of other studies which cover some of the key points around hygiene and our habits and attitudes. So we carried out a global study in July 2020. And this was very much to see how hand hygiene and washroom attitudes and behaviors have shifted in today's world. Now, in July 2021, we actually reran the survey. And this was to see if attitudes had changed over the course of the year. And just to give you a little bit of background on the introduction and methodology, the latest 2021 survey included over 15,000 respondents across 20 different countries across the globe. And they were all nationally representative of age, gender, and region. And the findings that I'm going to specifically share with you today are actually referencing 2,000 of those respondents, so specifically based from the UK. Now, the findings proved extremely insightful, and it highlighted the increasing level of awareness around hygiene, sustainability, and future trends, especially when it comes to the expectations of washroom facilities. Now, looking more specifically, we found that 45% of respondents are less likely to leave a washroom without washing their hands. And experts have noted that hands can transfer germs if not washed correctly, and that actually practicing good hand hygiene is an effective way to reduce the spread of bacteria and viruses, which can lead to infection. That said, unsurprisingly, we found that 75% of respondents are washing their hands with soap and water 5 or more times a day. And despite these attitudes relaxing slightly, the importance of washing your hands remains, with a high proportion actually repeating that process of washing and drying their hands more often than ever before. So I did say we'll try and make it a little bit interactive. So it's time for our first poll. And the question posed, and it should hopefully pop up onto your screens now, is what are you most likely to do if you find that a washroom has no working hand dryer or no supply of paper towels? And we've provided 4 of the most common answers from our survey, which I'll take you through in a second. So the first is dry them by wiping them on your trousers or top. The second is letting your hands dry naturally. The third, dry them with a pocket paper tissue. And the fourth is get some toilet paper to dry them. And whilst you all take a moment to make your selections, let me explain the importance of why we're talking about drying your hands effectively as well. And then we'll come back to your results as well. So, why is it important to dry your hands properly after washing them in the correct way? It's very much because damp hands can transfer up to 1,000 times more bacteria than dry hands. The best analogy I can use here really is, imagine you had one damp hand and one properly dried hand, and you put both of those hands into a bowl of glitter. If you then looked at both hands, which hand would have more glitter on it? And a similar principle applies to the way in which germs can transfer as our hands come into contact with different surfaces. Another example is, if you take the option, and those are that you've picked, wiping them on your trousers or your top, you could essentially be jeopardizing the hand washing process by actually adding the bacteria back onto your hands, because the clothing could be contaminated as well. And therefore, it's just as important to ensure that hands are dried correctly, as well as washing them properly in the first place. So the question that we asked in the poll is the same question that we asked within our study as well. And we know that awareness towards drying hands is increasing. 33% of respondents stated that hygiene considerations are actually a main purpose of drying their hands. So making sure that there are actually suitable solutions present to dry your hands properly is absolutely paramount. And they're not always provided or maintained properly. So as I mentioned, we asked the same question as today. What are you most likely to do if you find yourself without a working hand dryer or supply of paper towels? So respondents from the study, and I'll go through the results there and then we'll compare against what we've got up on screen. 27% let their hands dry naturally. So in comparison, 33%, slightly higher in the audience today. 20% try them on their clothes. So we've got 29%, again, slightly higher. And 16% equally, toilet paper and pocket tissues. And in comparison, we've got 9% and 29%. So interesting. Not many people carrying pocket paper tissues on this call then today. So really interesting just to see how the variety of different ways in which we choose to wash and dry our hands, particularly when we don't have the right facilities in place in the first place. Now, it's abundantly clear that there is still a concern about visiting washrooms. Whilst it's also clear that people are likely to visit washroom facilities more frequently. I think we can all agree on that. So what are some of the key frustrations and concerns that came out of this survey? Well, 59% were concerned about unclean toilets and essentially general uncleanliness. 41% were concerned about blocked toilets. And this is often, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, usually due to paper towels being flushed down the toilet, or in other words, vandalism. 35% concerned with no soap, which is probably going to be a common sight as we move forward due to the increasing awareness and usage of that in the washroom. 20% were concerned with empty paper towel dispensers. And this again is due to that increased usage in the washroom. But also interestingly, 23% were concerned with overflowing bins. And with more people washing their hands more often than ever before, it's inevitable that we will experience countless overflowing bins of contaminated single-use paper towels. So not only is it a hygiene concern, but also one from an environmental perspective too. And I'll hand over to Holly, who will take us through some of those sustainable benefits.
Thanks, Neil. So as you can see on this screen, we're going to talk about the use and the rise of single-use consumables. Now, ones that you may use within your life at home or in the workplace or when you go out, things like plastic straws and paper and plastic bags as well, or cotton buds. One of the biggest single-use consumables that's used within the workplace is single-use paper towel. Now, we've heard about all the hygiene effects from Neil. I'm going to move on and talk about more of the environmental impacts, as well as sort of like the maintenance that comes with single-use paper towels and obviously the costs associated with them as well. Now, globally, it's 666 billion tons of paper are still used every year, which is quite considerable considering there is such a focus on reducing our carbon footprints. So I'm going to take you through the journey of the paper towel. Now, a lot of people know about probably points 1 and maybe point 7, deforestation, and then obviously the single-use paper towels going into landfill. What we don't consider are probably the points in between as well. So there's a lot of transport that goes into this. So not only for the timber going to the paper mill, but then from the paper mill, obviously going to the customer at the end. And then again, the transport from when the paper towels need to be disposed of. Also, points 3 and 4, as you can see here, a considerable amount of water is used when making a single-use paper towel, and also there are a lot of chemicals that go into the process as well. Okay, we're now just going to play a quick video so you can visualize this journey as well. It's quite amazing to see all the different processes that just go into that single use of paper towel and drying your hands. What we do need to think about is, as the video says, make the change. What are we going to do to future-proof our workplaces and make them more sustainable? So comparing the single-use paper towels, what can we do? So we can use a more energy efficient drying solution, such as a hand dryer shown here. There's less carbon emissions, the maintenance is a lot lower, you don't have to fill up the paper towel dispensers, you don't have to empty the waste bins. Also, a lot of the hand dryers that are now on the market contain a Hepa filter, which overcomes those barriers to hygiene as well. You can use up to 85% less CO2 when using a hand dryer versus a single-use paper towel. And what's great for sort of like facilities management and things like that is the fact that it is a multiple use hand drying solution rather than a single use. What would be interesting to know from you, if you just want to jot down in the chat box, is how many of you work with your clients on kind of like the main things being carbon reduction, and you have paper towels at the moment, and maybe you're considering moving over to a different hand drying solution so that you can lower those carbon emissions as well. So you just jot those down in the chat box and we can come to them maybe at the end with Peter. So even though hand dryers have the same hygiene benefits, they're more sustainable, better for the environment, make the maintenance is a lot lower, there are still some concerns when it comes to using them. So is the air coming out the hand dryer dirty? You do still have to press on some hand dryers the physical button. Is there that contamination again? You've got nice clean hands, you're now having to press maybe a dirty surface. And are the machines themselves being cleaned regularly so that you're more confident that your hands will remain clean? So how can we overcome these concerns within the washroom? So 3 main points here. Touchless activation, so using sensors to recognize and dry hands more efficiently. And also what a lot of hand dryers have now is an antimicrobial coating, which kills bacteria and viruses. So that not only do you have to go around and wipe them and clean the machines themselves, they actually have this coating on as well. And then a lot of the machines, as I mentioned, the HEPA filters, so it overcomes that hygiene factor as well. So when dirty air is pulled in from the washroom, it goes through the HEPA filters so that you can be confident that when you're drying your hands, you're drying it with clean filtered air. So do you know in your workplaces or your clients that you work with, if you have hand dryers, do they have filters in them? Do you know what grade of HEPA filter it is, if it has a HEPA filter? When was the last time you checked that filter to make sure that it's still functioning as it should be? Right, we're just going to move on to the second poll. So the question here, what is the main business concern when it comes to sustainability? So there's 6 options here. If you can just have a quick read through those. As you can see, point 6 is mentioned other. If I could ask you within the chat box, if you could specify what other is, that would be really helpful for us. And it's also a discussion point that we can bring up at the end of the webinar as well. So I'm just going to hand you back to Neil, who's just going to run through a few points on lean engineering whilst those poll results come in.
Brilliant. Thanks, Holly. So yeah, whilst we wait for those poll results to come in, what does sustainability mean to us at Dyson? So our engineers are instinctively wanting to improve things, make them more efficient and use fewer resources. And it's actually a concept that we call lean engineering. And it's one of our core philosophies that enables us to use science, engineering and behavior change to improve the performance of products, but also using a lot fewer resources, which we know is important. One of the other ethoses that we have within Dyson, and it's very much part of our DNA really, is doing more even with less, right? So our engineers are always relentlessly dissatisfied with the way we design products traditionally, and are always looking for those problems to solve. And it's actually when we look through our pioneering technology, even our own workspaces and our philanthropic activities or education, and that's where we apply that methodology. And for us, it's essential that sustainability is at the center of Dyson and what we do on a day-to-day basis. So it'd be interesting to see how that compares with the poll results as well. Over to you, Holly.
Thank you. Well, that's very interesting. So 41% of you, your main concern is obviously reducing carbon footprint. Not really a surprise, because every conversation that I have with anybody, it's always around carbon emissions and how we can support with reducing those, along with costs, obviously, and consumption. And then we have got a couple of others, 3%. So we will come back to them with Peter at the end, just to have a look what those are as well. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a tool that we use here at Dyson. It's something that we have that just, as I said, that consultative approach to help with our clients, and just to show sort of like the quantitative figures of what you can do to not only lower your costs here, but also lower your carbon emissions, which we'll see on the next slide. So just running through these, it's called a costing carbon saving tool. So it compares. This one here is our, on the first page, the 9kJ is our hand dryer, and then it's versus the paper towel. So this is it's a small to medium sized company, 25 paper towel dispensers. So the project is swapping out the paper towel dispensers and replacing them with 25 hand dryers. You can see here under the total annual operating costs that this company were using spending £9,000 on paper towels every year. That is simply just the cost of the paper towel itself. That doesn't take into consideration anything like the maintenance or the time used, the people's time used either, or anything like that. And that is versus the annual cost of operating the hand dryers, which is only £44.47. With all the Dyson machines, you get a 5-year guarantee on all parts. So you can see that payback period at the bottom of that chart is 2.79 years. So that gives you just over 2 years left of that 5-year guarantee, but all you will be spending is that very low operating cost. So here, the second part of the tour. So this is We're talking about sustainability, your carbon emissions and your carbon saving. So just very briefly, you can see here with this example, 3.4 tons of carbon is being saved every year. I don't know if many of you have visited the Statue of Liberty, but just as an example, if you stacked all of that paper on top of each other, it would actually be 2.42 Statue of Liberties. So as you can imagine, that is quite a lot of paper that we're saving by doing that small switchover as well. So just an example, going over, so as we were just discussing, the 1 to 5 floors, that's the smaller end of the scale. And then I've just got some examples of a medium-sized building and then a larger or multiple buildings there as well. So 50 units and 100 units. You can see the paybacks are all very similar, all under 3 years. You can see the cost savings there as well, quite significant, especially if you look at that multi-buildings, £39,000 a year. It's a lot of money saved on that one. And then the carbon just there at the bottom, 29 tons of carbon you could save every year just by swapping out your paper towel dispensers for a hand drying. Okay, if we go on to our accreditations. So we've got 7 accreditations for our Dyson hand dryers. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about carbon. So you can see that we have the accreditation from the Carbon Trust. So this basically has measured everything that's embodied into that machine. So everything from manufacturing, transport, the use of it and the end of life disposal as well. And then one that's very prominent at the moment as well is the well building standard. There's a lot of companies going for this accreditation. And then also just to mention BREEAM. So to get the BREEAM standard that people want, so excellent or outstanding, and actually one of our products, the Wash Plus Dry Tap, gives you 12 credits towards these accreditations as well. So if any of you know BREEAM, that is a lot of credits going towards those accreditations. So I'm going to just go over some key takeaways. Just go back a slide, thank you, Neil. So 5 key takeaways here. I should read them yourself as well, but I'll briefly go over them. So people are feeling less concerned about using washrooms. However, frustrations do rise over the lack of hygiene and maintenance at the moment. Drying your hands thoroughly is just as important as washing them. Obviously, we want touch-free, Hepa filtered drying solution within our washrooms, which put us more at ease for drying our hands as well. Single-use paper towels have a considerable carbon footprint. That's all the way from deforestation to landfill at the end, that journey that we went through. And then a multi-use air blade hand dryer is proven to use up to 85% less CO2 emissions as well. Okay, I'm now going to hand you back for Peter. We're going to go through a few questions that you may have or just popped up in the chat box. So back to you, Peter.
Oh, thank you, Holly, and thank you, Neil, for really a very insightful presentation. That's literally been half an hour of a lot of information backing up some of the roots around sustainability. I just want to go back to the poll. We did have an option or other, and I just want to be fair to the audience that participated. We had a very wise audience member that recited that all of the above if your organisation wants to be truly sustainable. So that was a fair comment from that individual, so thank you for that. A big emphasis on technology. I think this attendee was very much focused on the technology and how that's more of a need, more of a must than just a need now when it comes to sustainability. And obviously you've touched upon some of the products on offer that they may help our viewers, listeners on that to make them meet some of their sustainable goals. And again, something that's really big and we have featured on our own NTT series is about improving the air quality of a workspace for staff considering human ergonomics. So obviously ergonomics is an area that we've also touched upon on our series and the big area for workplace professionals and facilities managers. So at this point, I do want to encourage the audience. We have got a dedicated time now to go through questions, so please send your questions through. But I think it's only fair to start off on this question, and I'll open it either to yourself, Holly or Neil, in respect that obviously sustainability is on the minds of most businesses globally. We've had COP26 in Glasgow at the end of last year. It really put that agenda on the map, alongside obviously pandemics, which obviously linked to washing hands and washrooms, which is part of today. But it'd be important, I think, for the audience just to understand, with all those challenges when it comes to the sustainability targets and the global sustainability goals, what is Dyson's role, and what are you planning to do as an organisation to really overcome those challenges moving forward? So I don't know who wants to answer that. So Holly, as you're smiling, I'm going to go with you.
Yeah. Well, it's something obviously that I work on daily, and we've got our own dedicated sustainability team within Dyson, and we've put there's probably six targets that what we're going to try and achieve, or we will achieve, let's say, by 2025. So I'll just go over a couple, but if anyone wants any further information, then please do let me or myself know, and I can share that with you as well. But by 2025, Dyson will be carbon neutral across business operations and also Dyson manufacturing. All of our sites will be sending no waste to landfill, and we'll be using 100% renewable energy. And we will have 50% recycled content in all of our Dyson machines. Every product that we engineer, every new product that comes out, will use a lot less energy than its predecessor. And then it will be a force of good in society through our people and technology as well. But as I said, those are just picking out a few. And if you need any more information, or if you would like any more information, or if you're just interested in more about what Dyson are doing, then please do let us know, and I can send you some information over on that as well.
That'd be great. And for those savvy listener viewers, you can see your contact details on there. So please reach out to Neil and Holly respectively. I'm sure they'd be happy to keep the conversation going after. Yeah, obviously through the presentation, and this is a question that's come in, obviously it feels like a boxing match, but I don't know how to put it. The hand dryer versus paper towel debate. And obviously, from that perspective, I know where Dyson's view was that, and the research backs that up. But there was a couple of comments in to build that on, where a couple of polls are indicating how people are using their washrooms. And thank you, Derek, for your point around he has over 150 toilet facilities. So when we're looking at people on today's audience, to make it probably obvious statement of the week, some of these people are looking at multiple facilities, possibly just not one washroom. So one of the comments that's come back, and Neil, I think I'm going to target this at you, about the benefits of hand dryers versus paper towels, which was a very powerful argument in today's presentation, and obviously evidence there. But this lady that's put a comment comment forward, I should say, could be a problem, is I've heard a concern about hand dryers is spreading in terms of the water droplets used out of hand dryers, and also how they fall on the floor. She's been quite descriptive. I think we've got the gist of what she means. What is the counter argument there? If you were looking at the paper towel debate versus hand dryer, I guess what was Dyson's view on that?
Wow, big question. So it's a really good point to make reference to. So what I believe was being referred to was the aerosolization in the washroom space. And it's something that was quite a topical piece over the last couple of years in the main. So we've actually carried out, and as I mentioned throughout the course of the presentation, everything we do at Dyson is very much focused around science and engineering and facts. And so we actually carried out a recent scientific study alongside Airmid Health Group. I will happily share more information on that. So do drop Holly or I a note if you want to learn more about that. But in a nutshell, that particular study compared various scenarios, differing scenarios in a typical washroom setting, and compared Dyson Airblade hand dryers versus paper towels. And in essence, over the course of all of those differing scenarios, to kind of take into account how different people utilize different washrooms in different ways, essentially the outcome of that study, that scientific study, was that Dyson hand dryers specifically, because that's all we tested, were just as hygienic as having a paper towel dispenser within the washroom space. And so from our perspective, we always wanted to check that properly and with the right channels. And that's the outcome that scientists that are experts in their field respectively have kind of demonstrated through these scientific studies as well. In addition as well, there's that element of, Holly mentioned it as well, the Hepa filtration. And I think that's probably what sets Dyson hand dryers apart in some respects, because from day one, from the very first hand dryer that we brought to market back in, I think it was 2006 or 7, we've always used Hepa filtration. And Hepa, for those that aren't familiar with it, stands for high efficiency particulate air filters, essentially. And because we use that particular technology or kind of material within our products, what we're essentially able to do is all the air that's been sucked in from the dirty washroom as such, because obviously there's particulates floating about, is actually purified, cleaned, and then blowing out clean, purified air onto your hands. So again, I think it's a pragmatic view that needs to be taken, but it's about choosing the right technology that offers you the right benefits depending on the space. And I think we try to do that in a number of different ways. So hopefully that answers the question, but more than happy to share some more details if you'd like to.
That'd be great in terms of that further research, in terms of the debate hand towels and hand dryers. I know, Holly, you kindly put a question out there, and apologies, we didn't get much response about people understanding whether they had Hepa filters already in existing hand dryers. Pardon my ignorance, but how new is the Hepa filter in terms of technology for those that might look at their facilities and might go, well, actually, I don't know. So is it quite common that there's still hand dryers on the market that don't have this technology within them?
Yes, it is still very common that a lot of hand dryers do not have Hepa filters. I believe people, if they're going to purchase a hand dryer, then one of the big selling points of most hand dryers, if they have the Hepa filter in, it would definitely be mentioned. As Neil said, Hepa isn't really a new thing, because we've had it since our first hand dryer was ever released. So I would check. It was all on the manufacturer's website of the hand dryer that you have. There'll definitely be information on there whether the Hepa filters are included in the model that you're using. But as I said, it's usually something that a company would advertise if they were selling their product with a Hepa filtration in there.
Yeah,
sorry, Peter. Just to add to that as well. I think one of the key things around Hepa as well is understanding the grade of Hepa that's used as well. So Hepa comes in a variety of different grades, and I think what makes ours different is the ability of our motors to be able to sort of suck in enough air and actually be able to blow it out properly to, as we discussed earlier, to properly dry your hands effectively, not standing underneath a hand dryer for 30 seconds and having damp hands touching other surfaces. So one of the highest grades of Hepa is actually H13, and that's the grade that we use in the Dyson machines as well. So obviously when you're looking at your filters of any machines you might have, it's also about making sure that you've got the best grade of Hepa as well to ensure that it's capturing the majority of particulates.
Yeah, that's great. We've had a couple of questions in. There's a bit of a theme here, and it's still on. I'm afraid it's still about the hand towels versus hand dryer debate. But what about these washrooms facilities that offer both? I guess is that the power of choice, or is that basically contradicting the whole sustainability argument? So I don't know if there's any views on that. But leading on to that, I guess what from your client stroke customers, what is the biggest barrier for organizations to convert that change from going hand dryer to paper towel, or are we in danger of seeing many washrooms with both facilities in there? So sort of a double barrel question there in terms of a couple of question points that come in. Is it wise to have both? And also, what are the barriers for people to convert to hand dryers that may be stocking up their 150 odd facilities with paper towels? So I'd just be interested from Dyson's perspective what those barriers might be. So I don't know who wants to take that one.
Well, I could take the argument on having both solutions in a washroom. I feel in somewhat it's due to personal preference, and also sort of like guidelines that have come out historically that people may have read and then kind of like not sort of like updated. This is why I'd always kind of say we take a consultative approach, because we like to educate people on the benefits of hand dryers over paper. It's an argument I'm sure that's will be going on for many, many years still to come. And it was one that was obviously very prevalent in the last 2 years as well, what we've kind of like gone through with that too. And sorry, Peter, what was the second part of your question again?
No, it was more about some of the barriers to people getting hand dryers, but also the choice of having those options within washrooms. Sure. I think you've answered that point.
Yeah, so that was the choice, but also so actually obviously purchasing a hand dryer outright, there is obviously a cost implication to that. If people they look at, right, how much is a paper towel dispenser, if they're say doing a new build, costs a couple of pounds maybe. Let's look at putting obviously the spurs in that are needed, and then purchasing the hand dryer as well. That again is another sort of like X amount of money. So they always look at kind of like the outgoing costs initially. What we can say is that we do offer a leasing solution as well. So you're kind of then looking more of an operational cost rather than an outright cost at the start too.
So options there for people in terms of payments and various other bits to accommodate their needs.
There is a lot of pushback on the cost side of things, the initial costs as well.
But I guess from that, without being pro either way from an impartial perspective, I think there's elements of that return on investment as well as the sustainable debate. So tying in with that, we've got a question in from Suzanne, so thank you. You mentioned within the presentation, as mentioned, sustainability at the heart of Dyson and very important to you as an organisation. But this question is quite direct about your products in terms of what is the percentage of recycled materials in your dryers versus made from recycled materials. So I don't know, from probably talk about lean engineering there, Neil, how much of that is a focus when it comes, I guess, to the construction of these products, and obviously as technology and advancements in composites and various other materials, how much does that have a role in I guess the design and build phase of your products?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think it's fair to say that we're also on a journey, as is many others. So as Holly mentioned, some of the kind of key focuses we have as an operational business is one aspect to it. But I think what's clear is that from day one, lean engineering and using finite materials has always been at the heart of what we do. And I think a good example of that is probably using the vacuum cleaner as one example. Think of the number of, paper bags that we've stopped from going to landfill because of that change and shift and awareness piece around how we actually clean our homes. So I think that's very much in our DNA, and that same kind of ethos applies in how we deliver professional solutions to the market as well, including our hand dryers as well. So it's something that we constantly look at and try and find ways to have a lower impact as such on the environment where we can.
That's great. It probably lends itself to one of the poll debates that's coming about the questions that obviously remind myself whether it's poll 1 or 2, but it's definitely one of those where people recited about the carbon footprint being the highest. I guess from Dyson, yes, you're there to support with your products and offer a service, but how do you build that relationship with your partners, clients, to help them on their carbon footprint journey, which, as I stated, with sustainability is going to be huge for organisations, not only in the UK, but globally. So how do you go about that? And is that in the offering of Dyson that you support organisations on their journey when it comes to their carbon footprint goals?
Do you want to take this one, Holly?
Yeah. So it's mainly going back to that point that I've made on sort of when we go and speak to new clients, we get from them sort of like what their pains are, what they're looking to achieve. We go through all of their sort of like sustainability targets, what they're looking to do as a business as a whole, rather than just looking at one specific part of the business, such as the washroom. And then what we can do is, obviously you've seen that we've got quite a lot of tools at our disposal. So not only am I saying this stuff to the clients and sort of educating them on what we can achieve if we were to go with different sort of products, but also we can then quantify it within the data that we use by working with them on the information that they provide us, and then showing them what solution we can bring to them, which then incorporates into their overall sustainability goals, and then helps them reduce their carbon footprint as well.
No, that's great, Holly. And I think a couple of comments that are coming from delegates or listeners, viewers, I should say, is around those points you've raised about the carbon reduction and really that price versus value debate, which obviously is key for anyone. Just moving on, obviously Dyson doesn't stand still, as you've just highlighted, that you've been in this arena of tech and advancements for a long time. But a little bit of future gazing, it might be an unfair question. What is the next potential product technology change in this area we might be seeing from Dyson? Because you mentioned obviously your R&I arm there at Dyson, and from my limited understanding of it is huge, and the investment in it's massive. How much of there's going to be a change in tech in the next 2, 5, 10 years around this area? Is it? I'd just be intrigued to know if there's any insight you can give us, Neil, Holly, on how you're developing product services in this area going forward.
I'm sorry to say, Peter, if I told you, I'd had to kill you. So I'm gonna
Sorry, folks, this is my last webinar.
So I'm gonna pass. No, but in all jokes aside, I think it's fair to say that trends within the business world is going to sort of influence how we bring technology to market in terms of what's required, what targets we need to hit. And I think sustainability kind of went on pause, arguably, since 2020 for a little while, and has kind of really come into its own again this year. And I think the key thing is going to be is how can we deliver technology that can help us not only reduce our carbon footprint or our the costs to a business, but also how we can use that data and that understanding of how our products are used in these spaces, and then how we can improve them for the future and continue to reduce those levels, but also improve that user experience. Because I think one thing that's often forgotten, I think there was a message that popped up and a question that was asked earlier around people's choice between paper towels and hand dryers and so forth. And I think it's an element of behavioral change as well. I think it's about understanding what do we need to be doing, how should we be acting for the future, and then using that kind of understanding to develop other technologies for the future. And I think one good example, at least one of our recent products, is the tap and hand dryer, which is allowing you to wash and dry your hands at the basin. So one of the challenges we've had in the past, and I'm sure many have experienced it, is water on the floor. So it's about taking into consideration hygiene, sustainability, and user experience, and then delivering something that kind of works functionally and of course commercially too.
No, that's great. And I think for me that's the area around this is that choice. And I think with behavior is going to be intriguing, as many of our episodes have focused on the hybrid working debate, and now we're seeing a shift back to people returning to offices. I think that behavior will go through a shift pattern once again, and how the facilities generally across office environments in particular, I'm picking on here, will potentially change again. So I appreciate, Neil and Holly, you can't give us the insights into what Dyson's next about. Obviously something that you're heavily monitoring, and something that you listen to your customers and the behaviors that drive those products and services. Just a question here about the research, which was a big part of today's presentation. Assumption here, so sorry guys, is that survey something you're going to be running yearly going forward? In terms of some of the results you shared today. So is that something as a tracker or something that we be looking at for the future years?
I don't know is the answer to that at this moment in time. We've just literally published the content that we shared with you all today. But yeah, if there are other updates of the survey, then we'll be more than happy to perhaps rerun this in a year's time or so, and pick up then.
Oh, that's great. So I guess I allow you, Holly and Neil, some closer remarks. Thank you for the audience that have sent their questions through, and those that we couldn't answer today, I will pass on to Holly and Neil to get back in touch. But I guess if there's some closing remarks from today, we've got a substantial amount of people that have joined us today, and some of those will be various roles within facilities management and workplace professionals. I guess from today, it's probably just a nice closing note from yourselves. What would you hope from individuals? Always hard to mind read individuals, what would you hope from Dyson's perspective they would have got out of today? So I guess it's that any conference or any session, what are the takeaways you hope individuals have got out today? So Holly, ladies first, because I am a gent, I've been told. But if you could just summarize, what would you hope individuals got out of today?
Thanks, Peter. To be honest, I'd like to think that we've kind of maybe educated them a bit more on kind of like maybe the hygiene benefits that come with other drying solutions rather than paper, because I feel like especially in the workplace, there's always this argument around paper towels being more hygienic, and that's sort of the reason that people shift towards that hand drying solution. So yeah, I'd hope that we were able to give some information and some facts from the survey as well that kind of have changed their thought process a little bit.
Thank you, Holly. And I think there was a lot of evidence to back your arguments up. And again, it's a choice at the end of the day, as you're aware, but the evidence is there. Neil, last remarks from your dear self would be great.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, sure. So it's a good question, really, because I think from my perspective, and it kind of leads back to the way I think as well, I think it's about learning from the past and future-proofing our estates, because I think one of the biggest challenges we find is how do you maintain, as you mentioned, some of the listeners on today's webinar is potentially managing, hundreds of different sites. And I think it's about how do you future-proof and make it more manageable. And I think hopefully this kind of short presentation gives you a bit of an insight as to how technology as a whole can help, but also how we at Dyson can help you in relaying those kind of facts and figures back to your organization and business as well, and really make a real change in your respective organizations. So we have the tools to do that. So do please reach out to Holly or I, and we'll be more than happy to support you through that journey as well.
No, and I think today is about providing potential solutions, options, which many of our audience might be struggling with the next steps in their facility. So that was great. So at this point, I want to say a massive thank you to Holly and Neil today to go through a stellar presentation that was actually really condensed in half an hour. And let's be fair, folks, that could have been an hour on its own. So I know we're getting close to the hour, but at this point, I want to say once again, thank you, Holly and Neil, for going through that. For our audience, just want to remind them there is a CPD number for today's event. So you can see it there. I won't read it out because you might be doing your lottery numbers, he says, but no, it's I won't read it out. It'd be on the slide. There you go. As reminded at the start, this was mainly the crux of our partnership, as well as today's webinar was producing some actual guidance for our members and non-members. This is accessible to non-members to download as well. It's hygiene in the workplace guidance supported by Dyson that is available on our website, so please take a look at that. It's got practical examples. It was touched upon today in today's episode in the importance of an area that for many from our own studies is some of the big concerns when returning to the office is some of these hygiene factors, and of course the washroom is one area that I'm afraid to say we all got to use at some point. So there's no hiding from that. But joking aside, please look at that guide. At the moment, we have our important market outlook survey. This is essentially a business confidence monitor that we run yearly, both for service providers and in-house FMs to complete. We've had a good response to date. The closing date's end of this year, but it's important really to forecast the next 12 months, particularly in the backdrop of what the last 2 years has been like for us. So an interesting study for me and my team to complete. So please, it's only as good as the responses we get. So please complete that survey. That would be great. Just to remind people, entries are open for our IWFM awards, and it's taking place the 17th of October. Theme of today concentrated on sustainability, elements of customer experience. Yes, they are 2 award categories for our impact awards, so please find more information on our website, but entries are now open, and we've had very, very good response on entries already. So please get involved if you wish. So once again, I want to say a massive thank you to Holly and Neil. Dyson, respectively, as an organisation, supporting us on our guidance. That's been great. Again, thank you for those putting the number up again for the CPD as it comes through. But again, this webinar has been recorded. I think Holly and Neil demonstrated it was live. I've probably demonstrated it is live, so there you go. But the recording will be shortly available on the website for you to cascade, look back on, or cascade to clients, customers, or your own teams to have a look at. So that will be available. Also, I just want to mention at this point, we do have a short survey. So it's not about rating today's episode. It's what you would like out of future episodes in the series. So that will be sent shortly after today's episode. So once we close this, you should be receiving a short survey to complete. We do have a session next week. So we do continue our NTT series. And I think the feature next week is it's apprenticeship week to remind our audience. So we do have webinars focusing on the apprenticeship. So an area that's very interesting when you're looking at upskilling and skilling your workforces. So please have a look out for that. So once again, thank you, the audience, for joining us today for the hour. As I say, many of these episodes could go on for longer, but just want to say thank you and hope to see you soon, and take care. So thank you again.